This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, hello everyone. Very good morning. As part of the previous session, we were discussing about how to configure Nginx as a reverse proxy for our application instances, how we can access the applications hosted behind Nginx in different servers, and how Nginx can distribute the load or a traffic using load balancing algorithms. And we discussed about different algorithms. So, continuation to that previous session, we'll try to further discussing about other concepts like DNS. So, if you see in last session, we have created three servers in which we have hosted our application developed in some programmatic language. This Nginx can be used as a reverse proxy or a load balancer for any type of applications. It no need to be a Java-based applications. Even it can be a static websites hosted in Nginx itself. Suppose in these servers, you can use Nginx or HTTPD, and you can install a static website, and you can route the traffic to that static web applications hosted in the servers again via Nginx installed in a different instances also, right? But in that Nginx configurations, you can mention on which server, which port the request should forwarded. Suppose if you have hosted a static website using Nginx or HTTPD in the application instances, you can say port 80 because the static websites hosted on HTTPD Nginx also listens on 80 if you are hosted. But in our scenario, we have developed, I mean, say we have a Java based dynamic web application, and that we have built and deployed in these application instances by installing Java and Tomcat. We have deployed, and the Tomcat listens on port 8080. So that is what we have mentioned in this load balancing nginx.conf file. If you went through the previous session, right, in this nginx, this is in the public subnet of our VPC. Guys, if you don't have a custom VPC with public subnets and private subnets, if required for understanding purpose, you can create your application instances also in the default VPC public subnets. Your load balancer also in the default VPC. By default, all are public subnets. And in the Nginx, you can use your application instances IP address. If required, you can use private IPs because in the same VPC, they can communicate with each other using private IPs. But the default VPC subnets are public subnets. We are not going to host our application instances in a public subnets in real environments. We need to secure that application instances from network like a public network. So we are going to have in the private subnets. The load balancer we will create in a public subnets. This is how we can use the networking concepts also. But for understanding only load balancer, you can do in default VPC also. But for now, we have a custom VPC. We already created a custom VPC with the combination of public subnets and private subnets. So this is our VPC, not a default VPC. In this VPC, we have created a subnets. Actually, I have planned 4 subnets in 1A, 2 subnets, 1B, 2 subnets. Like in each availability zone, one public subnet, one private subnet. We have a gateway, internet gateway, the route table where there is a routes to that internet gateway for these 2 subnets. And in the main route table, there is no routes to that. So we have that actual, this type of networking also. Now here we have an Nginx instance. Here we have a application instances. This Nginx instance can be reachable or routable from internet. This can forward the request to these application instances and give the response back to the clients or users like that. So if you see this, this is where I have started Nginx. I have installed and started Nginx. Nginx is running. Status Nginx. It is running. Now here the important directory. Here is etc nginx. In this, in the main file, this nginx.conf itself, if required, you can define the proxy rules, the reverse proxy rules. If any request comes to this nginx on port 80, what it has to be done, like that. But in this main itself, you can do. Otherwise, you can include. Otherwise, you can include this. You can define the rules in this file, and you can do that. But if you see the default one, this is going to serve the static content. Suppose if you have deployed, if you remember last time when we used Nginx, we copied our static website content to this folder that can be served as a web server also, right? But for now, here we are not doing any proxy pos, right? But we can do that here itself. Instead of serving the content from the root, you can proxy this to the other servers, group of servers. But that instead of defining in this main file, we have done in a different file, that is under this nginx only, etc nginx. There is one folder called confd. Here we have some file. Here I have defined if any request comes to this on port 80, we are forwarding the request to this group. We call it as a proxy pos. We are using this keyword called proxy pos. We are forwarding the request to this. Basically, this is like a one name we have given, like a up server pool, we call it. Here you can see upstream Tomcat server. So here we have added the server details. If any request comes to this load balancer on port 80, any request, it is going to proxy these servers, right? So in these servers we have hosted our application, and we have mentioned application port also. Now we can define algorithms that we have already discussed as part of the previous sessions. Now let's access that application via this load balancer. This load balancer has a public IP. If required, you need a static public IP for that load balancer, right? You can use elastic IP, and you can assign elastic IP as a public IP for this. Suppose for some reason, if you stop and start this load balancer, this IP will change public IP. Now I am not mentioning port. Even though I don't mention port also, the HTTP protocol. The HTTP protocol default port is 80. Even though I don't mention also, it will be 80 only, HTTP protocol. Even though if I mention also, it will do the same. Now I am able to see Tomcat homepage because request went to this load balancer on port 80, and any request location I have given path. After this, any subpath also, it will be handled by this rules. Now it is forwarding to this, but this is where we have mentioned IPs and ports. So any request goes to this load balancer on port, it is forwarding the request to these servers on that port. But my application is not running on the root context. It is running on a different context path. So I will give that path. If your application is deployed on the root context, then your application homepage will be loaded like this also. But this is my application context. This is one application developed in Java. I'm just giving some kind of input. Then again, this is a dynamic web application. You can see the customers are able to access the application like this. Now, the next concept here is health checks, load balancing algorithms that we have already discussed. So it will have a different algorithms. Suppose let me come back and refresh this page. By default round robin, one request goes to one server, subsequent request is going to other servers. So you can configure a load balancing algorithms also. In that we have already saw that, and also it will perform the health checks, and you can define timeouts, max fails, like that. So now we already saw that. Now let's get into the next concept called DNS, domain name. Suppose if you see you are an end user or end customer, you have to access the application like this. So this is the IP address, right? It is very difficult to remember the IPs. As a human, it is difficult to remember the IPs. So as you guys already know, every system in the network, that can be intranet or internet also, like a public network like internet, any system in the network has an address. That address is called as an IP address. So if one instance to communicate another instance, right, we need to know the IP address of the instance. So here it is very difficult to remember the IP addresses. Here it is very difficult to remember the IP addresses, especially the end users or end customers. This is where we'll use something called DNS. So what is this DNS? How this DNS will work? We'll try to understand now in a detailed way. What is domain name? What is a domain? What is a root domain root server? What is domain TLD server? Name servers, records, all these concepts we'll try to understand. It is also very important to know. So here basically, if you see any applications, like you guys are accessing a day to day so many applications like google.com, this is also a domain. This is the application, Google application. Similarly, you are going to use Gmail, Facebook, where you are loading the Facebook homepage. So here, this is like a home page of Facebook. Here you are giving some kind of a username, passwords. Then you are trying to interact with that application like this. Or maybe you take this Flipkart. This is also one application running somewhere, but you are using that domain, this domain name, to access that application. So basically, what is domain, and what is domain, and what is DNS, right? So domain name. Domain name is like a human friendly domain name, or a domain is like a human friendly name basically. Domain name is like a one kind of a name in the string format, right? That maps an alphanumeric addresses, IP addresses that used to access the website from client. So basically, so domain name. Examples, domain name is basically a human friendly name or address of a website. Website means that is again a server. In somewhere your website is deployed, that server. So a domain name is like a human friendly name that easy to remember name that is associated with some IP addresses, that is associated with some IP addresses, right? So examples for domains like google.com, facebook.com, this Flipkart, or city.co.in, or something, these type of banking applications also you are accessing, right? All these are like a domains. All these are like a domains. This is also one type of domain, like this. So here, how this domain work? There is something called DNS. DNS. So what is this DNS? How this DNS will work, right? So DNS is also one system. DNS is also one system. Domain name system. DNS stands for domain name system, or sometimes we call it as a domain name server. So DNS, or a domain name system, that is also one type of a server. That is also one type of a server, one type of a system. So here, that is what is the role of that DNS. So that role of the DNS is, it is going to translate. It is going to translate DNS, or the domain name system, is going to translate human readable domain names. For example, www.google.com to the machine readable IP addresses like 142.134.2, something like that. It is going to translate. So all computers, basically, all computers in the network, that can be intranet or internet, that doesn't matter. All the computers in the network, all the computers on the internet, from our smartphone to the laptops, that will serve the content of so many websites or web pages, right? Web application. And these systems will find and communicate with other using numbers. These numbers are also known as IP addresses. IP addresses. But it is very difficult to remember the IP addresses. But what you are going to do, you are going to use a domain name. Suppose you wanted to visit a website. Suppose you wanted to visit or access one website, one application. So what you will do, you will open a browser. You are a client. You are a client. You are going to open a browser. You are a client. You are going to open a browser, a web browser in your system, and you don't have to remember the IP address. Instead, you can enter the domain name. A DNS service. A DNS service is like a globally distributed service that is going to translate human readable names. That is going to translate human readable names to the IP addresses. That IP addresses is actually, they are going to use, the systems are going to use to connect with each other. So here, client server architecture, you have to remember. Let's take a diagram to understand even better way. Suppose you are a client. You are a user. You are a user. Let's imagine you are a user. So this is your system. This is your system. So in this system, you will open your web browser and you are going to enter a website domain name, but it has to reach the right server where our application is hosted. Suppose, just to give an example, you are the user. This is your system, and there is a server. Server is nothing but that is also a machine. Server is nothing but that is also a machine. Server is nothing but that is also a machine. That is also a machine, that can be a physical machine or a virtual machine. Okay, that is also a machine, a hardware. That can be a bare metal machine, or a virtual machine running in your own data center, or maybe cloud like AWS. So like this is the server, that is serving some kind of a, that is serving some kind of a application. Now you are going to use your system to interact with this server, right? This is your you are a client, you are going to use that your system to interact with this server. So basically it uses some kind of a protocols. So web applications will serve the content using http or https protocols. Web applications will serve the content using http or https protocols. Maybe this is the actual system where your application is hosted, or this is like a proxy, reverse proxy system. Your applications might be hosted behind this. Your application host might be hosted behind this also. That doesn't matter. Let's say these are your like application instances. Maybe in this instance itself your application is hosted and this application is served from here. Otherwise your application is hosted behind this instance, like you are using this as a reverse proxy or a load balancer. Then this is going to actually serve the content from this is like acting as a reverse proxy also. In this your application is hosted and you are serving the content, that web content or web application, that can be a static or dynamic, you are serving from here. And here you have defined the proxy rules, reverse proxy rules also. Now your the clients or users are interacting with this one to access the content of the applications hosted here. But here this system will have some kind of IP addresses, like a public IPs, private IPs. Public IPs are required to serve the in order to access in the public networks like internet. Just to give an example, in our case also, this is my actual system. I mean, say this is my system where I have not hosted my application, but using this we are serving the content hosted in this server. So I mean, say we are serving the application deployed in other servers, but we are using this as a reverse proxy load balancing for we already discussed. So this is the public IP of that load balancer. And the customers like you, it again in this system, the basically in this system there is a process running to serve the content. Again this is listening, this can be configured to listen on 80 or a 443. These are like a default ports. If required, you may have a doubt, sir, can I configure this on different ports also? Obviously you can configure, but if you mention the if you use different ports, the users has to access with that port only. Suppose, just to give an example, let's say this is my nginx here here in this nginx configuration file. If required, I can make the changes. Let's say instead of let's say here instead of listen 80, I can say listen 8080. This is my load balancing port, or I can say 9090, whatever it could be. Now if I mention like this, when we have to access that application, let's save this, and let's make any changes are done to that conf file. You can reload nginx reload or systemctl also you can use, like or maybe do this, or restart also you can do. Okay, systemctl. Okay, now you can do like this. Now if you access like this, that load balancing ip that load balancing ip, now if you don't mention also default port is 80, even though you mention, now you may not see that response actually. what you are trying to expect that basically that tomcat, because in this we have a one more in the default nginx conf file. It is serving the static content of that welcome page of nginx like that. So in this case you have to mention like this 8080. This is load balancing port. This is load balancing port, but this port I have not opened in the firewall. This port I have not opened in the firewall of this I have not opened in the firewall in this system. In this system I have not opened that 8080 port. Basically, what I am trying to say that load balancer also will accept the traffic on certain ports that you can define. Now, if I open like this, I may see like this, but my application context is this student registration web app like that. But this is not your Tomcat instance or application instance. This is load balancing instance only. But here you have to mention the port if you are accepting or listening the traffic in that load balancer in a different port. You have to mention. But most of the time we will not define on the custom ports. We are going to listen or accept the traffic in the load balancers on the default ports only, because end users don't mention the ports. They will just mention the domain name, and they are not mentioning port. So this load balancer most of the time will accept the traffic on port 80 and port 443 only. So let me revert this changes that I have done in the load balancer. So here I will accept on default port. Later I will make the changes also. Later I will make the changes also to configure HTTPS, and 443 port also will start accepting the request. Now let me come back and let me access like this only. It will work. Now it is going to work this way. Now it is not going to work on 8080. That load balancer we have not now listening on 8080. Let's remove this. But here understand the concept of domain now. So you are a user. You are a user. You are trying to access this application. You are opening a browser. You are a browser. Here you are giving the address like this. You are giving an address. In case of HTTPS, if you are using, a request will go to that server on a 443. 443. If you are giving HTTP, request will go on port 80. So here your application can be served directly from here, but now I have not deployed my application here. These are like a actual systems where my application is hosted, but this is acting as a reverse proxy. It is serving the content by communicating with this now, but that does so here we are defining the rules. If any request comes to this load balancer, so to which server it has to communicate and get the response back and give the content back to the client. So now this is called as a client server architecture. This is client, this is the server. This server itself can serve the content, or this server itself can serve the content, or this server can internally talk to the other servers and get the content, content accessed by this client, content requested by this client. So here that is how it is working. But here this guy has to use the IPs, but it is very difficult to remember the IPs. So this is where there is a concept of domain name comes. Domain name. Domain name is like a human friendly name that you can map to the machine readable IP addresses. Suppose this IP I can map with some name, human friendly name. Suppose like this rushitechnologies.com, rushitechnologies.com. This is my domain name. Just to give an example that I can map with these IPs, this type of IPs. Now the users like a clients, the users are a clients, they no need to remember this type of IP now. Instead they can use this name. Instead they can use this name Instead, they can use this name. But this name will be internally resolved to the IP with the help of whom? That DNS servers or a DNS, right? This name will be again resolved to this IPs only. Request will go to this IP only again. But there is a concept of DNS lookup, DNS resolutions like that. So now let's get into the more insights of DNS. So as I already said, DNS is like one system again, globally distributed system. Globally distributed means this DNS servers or DNS systems are there across the globe again. So these DNS systems are typically managed by one organization, one non-profit organization called INA, Internet Assigned Numbers and Names Authority. So they are owning the DNS servers. Logically speaking, practically speaking, there are 13 DNS servers hosted across the globe. There are 13 DNS root servers. There is a concept of root servers. We'll come to that. There are 13 DNS root servers that is deployed across the globe. So DNS root servers across globe. There are 13 DNS root servers. There are 13 DNS root servers, right? DNS root servers. Root servers. If you see this INA, there is one organization called INA, Internet Assigned Numbers and Names Authority. They are maintaining, they are operating these DNS root servers. These DNS root servers are there. There are total 13 DNS root servers. I will explain what is this root servers in these locations. Here one DNS root server, here one DNS root server, here one DNS root server, like that. There are 13 DNS root servers operated worldwide. Now here, what is the role of this DNS root server? What is domain? What is authoritative name servers? What is TLD servers? We'll try to understand in some time, but we will get into one by one, right? So as I already said, DNS, domain name system, is going to translate human readable names to the machine understandable IP addresses. All the computers, whether in the internet or intranet, from our smartphone to the laptops and to the servers, they are going to serve massive content like so many applications that can be retail web applications, banking web applications, or hospitality, travel, healthcare. There are so many different, basically, there are so many different domains: finance, healthcare, travel, like this retail, finance, like there are so many contents, there are so many web applications hosted in so many servers, and we are going to communicate or access that applications using that IP addresses. These IP addresses difficult to remember, so that is where we are going to use a domain name. You can think of this domain name like a phone book, guys. You can think of this domain names like this DNS is like a phone book. Suppose within suppose you have a phone numbers, right? It is very difficult to remember the numbers, but you are mapping that number with some name. So you are looking the number, you are trying to find the number by giving the name, by searching the name, you will be able to find the number, right? Phone number. This DNS also work exactly like that phone book. This DNS also exactly works like a phone book only. Again, we have a internal DNS, external DNS also like that. Basically, public DNS, private DNS. Public DNS are like a internet DNS systems. Public DNS is like a internet DNS systems, right? That domains is that public domains or public DNS is like anyone in the internet, can able to find the IPs of that domains if it is mapped in the public DNS. Private DNS means internal. You can also set up your own DNS systems. You can also set up your own DNS servers within your network. for internal domains that are not able to, that internal DNS will work only within the network. But for now, let's understand about public DNS, globally distributed internet DNS basically. So here, how exactly this will work? But first, let me tell you how this DNS will work. Suppose you are a client, you are a user. Suppose, just to give an example, you are trying to type google.com, right? So suppose you are trying to access Google, that is also one application, right? Now here you are trying to type like www.google.com. You are a user. So first, maybe this is the Google server. Maybe this is like a reverse proxy or a load balancer or a gateway, API gateway or a load balancer or whatever it is. So this is like a Google server, right? But this name will not take you to the server directly. This name will not take you to the server directly. This name in the network, any systems that can be internet or a intranet, in the network, one system to communicate with another system, they have to use their IP addresses only. The numbers will not work. But this name will not take you to this server to get the response. So first, before a request reach this system, first of all it has to find out the IP address of this domain. So first what will happen, there is a concept called DNS resolution or a DNS lookup. So the moment we open a web browser, you are going to open a web browsers, like there are so many web browsers you are trying to use to access the web applications, that web application hosted locally or a web applications hosted remotely. You are using a web browsers like Chrome, Mozilla, Firefox, Safari, Microsoft Edge, like that. So you are opening a browser and entering some name in the address bar and press enter. Now the request for this domain, first the request for this domain is routed to the DNS resolver. There is something called a DNS resolver. So who is going to maintain this DNS resolvers? Basically there is something called DNS resolver. So these type of questions also asked in the interview. What is DNS resolution or DNS lookup? So first request will go to something called DNS resolvers. DNS resolver for resolving the IP of the domain. This process is called as a DNS resolution or a DNS query or a DNS lookup. So first request goes to the DNS resolver. It is going to, just like in plain English, if I have to say, it is going to ask. It is going to ask, give me IP of the domain, like that. So it is going to ask, give me the IP of the domain, like that. So this DNS resolver. So this DNS, it is going to first contact that DNS resolver. Give me the IP. Give me the IP of what is the IP of this domain, like that only it will ask. But this DNS resolver, in the DNS resolver, if it is already cached, if that in the DNS resolver, if it is already cached, the IP of the domain, then it will immediately give, okay, I already know the IP of this domain. This is the IP of the domain, like that. They will return. But if in the DNS resolver it is not there, then it is going to contact basically the root server, DNS root server. So this DNS resolvers basically managed by ISP. ISP means internet service providers. That can be cable internet provider or a broadband provider or a corporate network, that doesn't matter. These DNS resolvers are typically managed by ISP, internet service providers, right? Suppose you are taking a internet service from some provider, that can be a broadband or a cable, whatever it can be. So in this DNS resolver, if the IP is already cached, it will be returning from here. Otherwise, again, this is going to contact something called DNS root server. It is going to contact something called DNS root server. These DNS root servers worldwide, worldwide there are worldwide there are 13 root servers. So this DNS root server, this DNS root servers, right? This DNS root server. What this DNS root server will do? This is also kind of a hierarchical systems, hierarchical architecture is there here. So this DNS root server, based on what type of domain we are accessing, we have different types, right? Like a .com, in country wise, .in, .uk, like that you may see these type of domains, .edu, .org, or maybe .co.in or .info. So we have a different types of domain, .net, like this. For informational site, we are going to have a .info domain. That is like a kind of a best practices. For educational related, right, organizations, you may use .edu. That is recommendations, but they are not restricting you to use .com domains also. But that is how they have. We have different types of domain, .com, .in, .uk, .edu, country, .co.in, India, like that, .uk, US, like org, .edu, .net. We have a different types of domains. So this DNS root server, based on for what type of domain you are expecting an IP, right? So here it is asking, like request goes to give me IP of the domain. Again, this will, if it is there here in the cache, it will return. Otherwise, basically, again, it will contact this DNS root server. This DNS root server, give me IP. Give me IP of this domain. So this DNS root server, based on for what type of domain you are trying to get the IP. So this will give not IP of this domain. It will give the TLD server of this type, this domain. TLD server. There is something called TLD server is there. It is going to tell, go and contact this TLD server. TLD stands for top level domain. Top level domain. This .com, .co, .in. These are like a TLD. So there are different TLD servers, top level domain servers for each type of domain. Suppose I am trying to access .com domain. So there is a, this is the, there will be a TLD server. So it is going to give this DNS root server. This DNS root server will give. So go and contact this TLD server. So this will give TLD server IP. Go and reach this this system, TLD server. So this is going to give contact this .com TLD server. It is going to give .com TLD server details. It is going to say, go and reach this server. This server will give, the root server will give the IP of this TLD server. Again, this we are not managing. All these are managed by INA and internet service providers or DNS providers. This DNS providers, domain name providers also. So now again this DNS resolver will reach, please give me the IP of, again it will contact this TLD server. Again it will contact this TLD server, give me the domain, IP of this domain. Then this TLD server, this TLD server, this in this TLD server, this is going to say, go and contact this authoritative name servers, like that. It will say, this TLD server will say, go and contact this TLD server will say, go and contact the authoritative name servers, like that. So again it is going to tell, go and reach this one. This is going to say, this DNS resolver again will contact the TLD name servers of the .com domains. TLD servers, top level domain. TLD server. So, but this TLD server, what it will tell, here also there is no mapping. This TLD server will say, go and contact the name server, authoritative name servers, like that. So again, it will give some other server detail. It is going to give the name server details, authoritative name server details. of that domain, like that. So there is a documentation also, right? If you see here, so this is like a DNS resolver. This is like a DNS resolver, right? This is typically managed by ISP, and when we are entering any domain, first it will contact this DNS server. Suppose right, every network is connected with internet, right? Suppose internet or intranet. So in case of Linux systems also, where any domain has to be resolved from which server, which DNS resolver or a name server, right? That details is there in the etc folder resolve.conf file. We are giving some kind of a server details, name server, or that go and contact that internally, that will contact so many systems like DNS root server. This DNS root server will say go to the name server of this .com TLD server, top level domain server. Then this top level domain server will give, go and contact this authoritative name server, like that. So this is going to give again contact authoritative name server. So basically these are name servers or authoritative name servers is typically managed by DNS providers. DNS provider, this is like a name server, name servers. It is authoritative name servers. Basically these name servers are typically managed by DNS providers. We are registering or we are purchasing the domain from some kind of a DNS provider. We are registering or purchasing the domains from some kind of a DNS providers. You have so many DNS providers like GoDaddy, right? Google DNS. In AWS also there is something called Route 53. There also you can register the domain or purchase the domain. These name servers are typically managed by that DNS providers who is providing the domains, from whom from which provider you have registered the domain, right? Like a GoDaddy or maybe Google DNS or AWS Route 53, like that also. So then it will contact this DNS resolver will contact, give me the IP of the domain. But suppose in this TLD server, if it is already cached again, if this TLD server already it is cached, it will give the content, that IP. If it is not there in this cache, then only it will say go and contact this name server. Like a caching also there, because it has to improve the performance also, right? It should not take so much time for resolution itself. If it is not there in the cache, this will go and say go and contact this name server. Then this name server will give the IP of that domain. This is where we are going to create a records or a mapping. DNS records or a mapping. In this name servers only, we are going to have some kind of a mapping. Like suppose, just to give an example, google.com is mapped with some IP, like that. So it is going to give the IP of that domain mapped, whatever. Then this name server is where you have a records, DNS records. We have a concept of DNS records or a mappings. So this name is mapped with this IP, let's say. Then it is going to return this IP. Again, it is going to ask what is the IP of this domain, like that. This DNS resolver will ask with the name server, authoritative name server. This is where we have a records. This is going to give the IP to this resolver. Then this is going to return that IP of that domain to our basically the client, like a user, the browser here, the browser. Then this will contact. Then this will contact that IP over network. Based on the protocol, again they are accessing, right? If it is HTTP protocol, request will go on 80 to that IP. If it is HTTPS protocol, request will go on 443, even though they don't mention port here. They're not mentioning any port, right? Only IP. They're not mentioning like 443. They're not mentioning like 8080, like this. Suppose if I mention like this, you may not get any response also. Maybe on that IP for which this is mapped, there is nothing accepted. Maybe firewalls are not open, like that. Now this is how the DNS resolution will work. we call it as this process is called as a DNS resolution or a DNS lookup. Now request goes to this system where that application is hosted. Maybe that is not directly hosted here. Maybe that application hosted in internal servers, private servers. But this is going to get the content, for that client by contacting this internal servers again. This is the whole process of DNS resolution or a DNS lookup. So, but now I am also developing one application, right? As an application owner, I need to also have a domains, and I need to also map the domains, so that my customers, my users can remember that name easily and they can access. So now here, how to do this again for our own applications? Also, whatever we are developing for some clients or some users, as an application owner or application owners, they will say this is the domain we want. Like that, they will register the domain somewhere. Maybe that domain registration can be done in so many providers. We have so many DNS providers. We have so many DNS providers like GoDaddy, Hostinger, or AWS Route 53, Google DNS, like that. So you can register the domain with any one of the provider. Here, basically, we have a multiple steps here. First, we need to buy or a registered domain. Buy or a registered domain. Then the next one is you have to map or create. Mapping is nothing but create a records to map the domain with system. That system can be domain, create a records to map the domain with the IP address of a system. This system can be a load balancer, or this can be a directory server, but most of the time it can be a load balancer or any other system. That can be a load balancer, or maybe directly your web server. If it is a static website, you are serving directly also, like that. That can be anything. Like this, this is a two-step process, but domains is not free of cost, guys. But some DNS providers are giving some kind of a domains for less charge, like .xyz domains, some kind of a domains they are giving for a free of, I mean, so not free of cost, very less price. But if you are looking for a .com domains, .co.in domains, or .net domains, these type of domains is not for free and not for less charge also. They will charge some kind of an amount per yearly charges. So first you are going to register the domain, buy or register a domain using DNS providers, domain providers. So who is providing the domains and who are also having the name servers where we can map also. So we have so many DNS providers like GoDaddy, Hostinger, and they are not only the DNS providers, they are they are like a hosting platform. Suppose you wanted to host some kind of an applications, right? You can, they are giving a servers also, like systems also, where you can host applications, and they can give domain certificates also, like that. But I'm only talking about DNS now. So GoDaddy, Hostinger, even in AWS also we have a Route 53, right? And similarly in Google also there is Google DNS, like this. Like there are so many DNS providers where you can buy or register the domain. Now, suppose if you guys wanted to practice a domain, this concept, maybe you can use local DNS. Local DNS means within your host file. Within your host file also you can map. Within your host file also you can map every system that can be a personal system, or that can be any server also. Like every system has a host file. Even in Windows also you have a host file. This is like a local DNS. If required, you can map that some kind of an IP with some kind of a name locally in a host file. In this host file also you can do some kind of a mapping, but if you are using this local host file, this is called as a local DNS. Whatever IP you have mapped with that name here, that will resolve only in this system local DNS, not in the internet DNS. Suppose you are using locally, locally you are mapping so the IP with some name. That name, if you are using that, it will result to the IP only within that system, not in the internet DNS or a global DNS. But if you don't have a domain, at least you wanted to understand, I mean, say, feel like you are using some name, you can do that in your local host file also. In your local host file also, you can do that. Suppose in Windows also you have a host file, Mac also you have a host file, in Linux also you have a host file, like that host files. You can map any IP like these type of IPs with some type of names, right? In the local host file also. But typically this is not we are going to do. We are not going to ask any clients or any users basically. We are not going to we are not going to ask any clients, like any clients or any users to have this type of mapping in the host files like that. Suppose anyone connected to network, that can be internet or intranet, this type of to which system it has to contact for resolution, and these type of settings, there is something called DHCP, dynamic host configuration protocol. There is a DHCP servers, that a DHCP servers will configure that host dynamically. You no need to manually give the IPs to that system. You no need to manually tell to which system it has to contact for DNS resolution, that DNS resolver IPs. So we no need to do. There is something called DHCP. So that DHCP, like a dynamic host configuration protocol, there is a DHCP systems that will configure that systems, whatever systems connected to any network, that can be internet or a intranet also, any network the system is connected, that DHCP is going to give the IP address for that system also, local IP, private IP. At the same time it is going to configure so many other network settings, like to which DNS resolver, I mean say, which system it has to contact this for resolving this type of domains. All these things will be given that DHCP. But if required, locally also within your host file you can manually also map. But this is not we are not going to ask any users or any people, any clients to map like that. But if you don't have a domain, you are a student, you are a learning, you are practicing, you can use this host file also. But in real time it is not going to do that way. Suppose you guys are using Windows. In Windows also you have a host file, Windows 10, Windows 11, whatever you are using, host file. Basically in this location you will have a host file. But in order to edit this host file in your Windows, you can use any text editor like Notepad, but it has to be open as an administrator. It has to be open as an administrator, not as a normal Windows administrator again. So how to do that? Maybe you can go to search bar in Windows search bar, search with the Notepad. Once you see, right click on the Notepad and open as administrator. You have to open Notepad also as an administrator. Once the Notepad is open in the administrator, you can go to the file explorer and locate that file and open that file in the Notepad. Suppose if you don't know also, there are so many ways. Edit host file, edit host file, Windows host file. So here you can edit also host files, you can edit maybe let me open on one more website. Like you can edit host files in Windows like this again. You can go to you can go to search bar, type Notepad. Search bar means in the below you have a Windows bar, right? The search bar, type Notepad, right? Once you see, right click on the Notepad and run as administrator. Once the Notepad is opened, you can go to this file open option and navigate to this C drive, system32 drivers etc, but you may don't see any file. Here you have to select all files like that. Instead of .txt files, all files like that if you select, then you can see host file. Then you can open that host file, then you can give IP address and that name, whatever name you would like to map that IP. This is like a local DNS, not a global DNS or internet DNS. But if you wanted to feel like you can give that load balancer IP with some name, but this name will result to that IP only within the system. First, first it will check in the host file also. If it is not there, it will contact the DNS resolver. But for now, if you wanted to feel like you are using a domain, you can follow this within your local system. You can do. Suppose if you guys are using MacBook, in MacBook also you have a host file. Edit the host file. MacBook also you have a host file. MacBook also have a host file. So in Mac, it is there in etc. It is there in etc directory. Mac, in Mac it is there in a etc directory. Suppose you can see like this also, you can edit. So in MacBook, that will be part of etc folder. You can do this way also. You can open terminal means command prompt, and you can use vi or nano also in MacBook editors, and you can open that, you can do that. Suppose, just to give an example, for now let me show that how to do that local host file mapping also, but we are not going to do this way. I have a domain, I will show that real domain with real DNS again. Let's say this is the load balancer. I'm going to take this IP, public IP. This is my personal laptop. Let's open a terminal. My personal laptop like this. This is my local system, my MacBook, right? So here there is a file again, host file also there here. This is my local system, not any server, my laptop. Here also you can do this type of mapping. Here also you can do this type of mapping. Let me do, I have to use sudo because this is also admin only has to do in locally also. I can open like this. This is asking my password, my local password. Now here I can do this type of mapping. Let's say this is the IP. Let me give some name like this, just to give an example, just to give student, just to give an example, student, or maybe let me give something like this, rushitech.com. I don't have an actual domain, I don't have a rushitech.com, but I am just giving like this, rushitech.com. That I have mapped to this IP, that is my load balancer IP, just to give an example. You can do if you are using in Windows laptop also like that. Now I can use that name. This is my browser. I am using that name, rushitech.com. But locally it is resolving. Locally it will resolve, but maybe means HTTP protocol, right? As of now, we have not configured HTTPS in that load reverse proxy. Let me use HTTP like that. Press enter. Now, if you see, this name is resolving to that IP, but only locally. Now, this is my application context. If your application is running on the root context, then it will load on the home page itself. But this is how it is working. Now I am using the name rushitech.com. But this will work only locally. Suppose any other client or any other system is trying to use this, it will not work. Suppose you are one more customer, one more student, let's say. So here if they enter like this, in this host file it is not there. In this system host file it is not there. But in this system host file I have mapped like that IP. That rushitech.com is mapped with this IP only locally. But here I have not purchased or I have not registered any domain. I just mapped like this. But this local DNS is not going to work, right? Because for this is like any in the any system in the internet. If anyone is trying to access, this is internet facing application, right? This is internet facing application. So any system in the internet, if they are using that name, it has to result to that IP. But this type of mapping I have not done here in the DNS, global DNS, or a public DNS or internet DNS, whatever you call it. But here I have not done that type of mapping. Locally I have done. So it will work only locally in the system. Other people, if anyone try to access, if you guys try to access also, it may not work, right? Any one of you who are part of our session now, can you guys try to access that given URL? Are you guys able to access? Is that name rushitech.com is resolving to any IP from your systems? Anyone? Can you guys access the given URL? Not reachable because I have done locally, but this is not the way. This is not the way we are going to do. So we are going to register the domain. We are going to register the domain and we can map the domain. So maybe you can register the domain in AWS also if you are using AWS cloud. If you are using Azure cloud, there is a service in Azure cloud also, there is a service, DNS service. If you are using GCP cloud also, there is a DNS service. Otherwise, you can register the domain outside of your cloud provider also. That can be in GoDaddy, Hostinger, wherever. Even though you have registered the domain with a different DNS provider, you can still use that domains with AWS services also. Maybe AWS services also you can use that domain. But for now, if required within AWS also, there is a service called Route 53. One service called Route 53. Route 53. What do you mean by this 53, right? Basically, the DNS servers will accept the request for DNS resolution on 53 port. The way we have a SSH port on 22, the way we have a SSH port on 22, web server port 80, 443, Tomcat 8080, Jenkins 8080, Nexus 8081, database MySQL 3306, like that. This DNS servers will listen or accept the DNS queries or DNS requests on 53 port. So that's why they have named it as a Route 53. So this is one service in AWS, Route 53. In this Route 53, you can create some kind of a, you can register the domain also. If required, you can register the domain. There is a, you can see register domain. If you go to this Route 53 dashboard, you can see register domain. Here itself, you can register the domain. Suppose I am just giving an example. Rushi Technologies, Rushi Technologies, Rushi Technologies, RushiTechnologies.com. RushiTechnologies.com. .com domain I am trying to look. RushiTechnologies.com. But this is not available because I have already registered. It is going to say this is not available. This domain is not available because I have already registered. This is not available, like that it is saying. But they are saying instead of this, you have different names like rushitechnologies.org, rushitechnologies.net, rushitechnologies.me. So they're saying how much a charge for these domains: $17, $15, 71 USD dollars. This like this they're giving like this. Now they're saying pricing also. How much prices for what type of domains they're also telling here. Suppose let's say Flipkart. Flipkart is already registered by Flipkart as a company. They are using this. This is also not available. But you are trying to use for your application, your business name, your application. You can give some name, right? That domain name you can register. Suppose just to give an example, if you have like Rushi Tech I'm just saying Rushi Tech. Now this rushitech.com is also not available. Someone already used, I think. So there we have this type of things. Rushitech.net, something, whatever. You can select this, and the price is 17 USD dollars per year. You have to select this, you have to proceed further and make some kind of a payments, but I don't proceed with this. I don't proceed with this. And here they're saying accounts with the free plan, accounts with free plan cannot register or transfer the domains, because we are using AWS for free, right? They're not allowing you to register. They're saying you upgrade to business plan and you pay the money and use it, like that they're saying. But anyhow, I have a domain with a different provider, because AWS accounts I am using only for explaining DevOps concepts. So many AWS accounts I use, I don't want to stick to the AWS for my domain purpose. So I have a domain from different provider, but if required, you can select the domain, you can proceed and register the domain by this price, like that. But I don't have a domain with AWS, leave it. I have a domain with a different provider. There is something called Hostinger. Hostinger. This is also one platform for hosting applications again. But here I am not hosting my application. I am only having a domain. But maybe they may give some kind of a domains, right here. But suppose here also, let's say some name. Suppose Rushi take something like this. Now they are saying this domain is available for in Indian currency. It is they are showing 200 rupees per year, and they are saying this is available for this much. But maybe what you can do, you can pay 200 rupees and register these domains, like that also if required. But for practicing, maybe you can use that local host. But if you are getting for 200, 300, right, you can just use it for 1 year, or maybe if you wanted to continue, you can continue. Or you can, if you wanted to leave it after 1 year, if you don't pay, then they will take this domain away, they will again not this domain is not available for you, you have to renew again. So if required, you can pay, like make it yours, and you can pay. And some kind of a domains they are giving for less charges also. Let's say there is a concept xyz domains, xyz. So here zero zero for these type of domains, zero price. First year zero price. So you can zero, you no need to pay anything. But this is like a .xyz, no one will use in the business like .xyz domains, right? So like .com, .co, .in, like that. Suppose if required, you can create an account in Hostinger and you can use this type of .xyz domains also. Maybe you can give some name, your, suppose you have some idea, some name, like that. You can register, this is real domain, but free, because we are using .xyz domain. If required, you can create account in Hostinger. You can create an account. If you have, you can directly log in with your Google also. You no need to sign up full details. You can give your mail ID and you can log in. Suppose I already registered, right? This is my personal Gmail. I registered already. I'm using that Gmail credentials, and I will log in there. It is asking me. Yes, it's me only. So now I have already have a domains. For my real application, I have one domain. For explaining this DNS concepts, I have another domain. Suppose if I see here also, you can search. Suppose you want free domain, right? Just to give an example, Rushi Tech. Maybe you can go to here, domains. You can search, add new domain or purchase domain, get a new domain. Here you can see get a new domain. So here you can search. Suppose you need, just to give an example, .xyz domain. If I'm just giving .xyz, but for me they are saying you have to give this much, like that. Maybe for the first time you are using this Hostinger, account, right? Maybe they will give for free of cost, or maybe less price, 200 rupees, something like that. But I already have a domains and I already have account, that's why they are showing that much amount. But you can see some prices also, dot online, dot shop, like this. Suppose if you just give this type, let's see how much price, 89 rupees. Dot online domain, like that, you can see dot shop, dot org. But this dot com, dot net, dot io, these type of domains are costly. Let's say I'm just giving like this they're saying this much, like that. And again you can see dot this much, dot ai this much, like this they're giving the price. Maybe dot xyz also they're charging for now. So you can register, you can select. Suppose you can select, you wanted to pay for 1 year, 2 year, you have to give your card details and you have to pay, like that, for 3 years or 1 year, based on what, like that. Okay. So for now, leave it. I already have a domains. If you see my portfolio, I have a two domains. One is for actual application, my Rushi Technologies application. You guys are accessing rushitechnologies.com. This domain I already mapped with some server where I have hosted my application. So here, this domain, this rushitechnologies.com domain, we already mapped to some IP. We already mapped to some IP where that application is hosted, where my application is hosted, that Rushi Technologies application. You guys are accessing like this, right? www.rushitechnologies.com. This is also one kind of an application that that we have deployed somewhere. I mean, say in Hostinger only, I have a server. Here itself, I have deployed that, right? This application, this domain is internally resolving to this IP only. If you see whatever we have mapped this IP. Suppose in Linux sessions we have already discussed some kind of a commands. Suppose you wanted to find the IP of a domain again, you can use some kind of a commands. If you guys remember, we have a ns lookup command. We have dig command, like that. Suppose maybe just to give an example, I can use ns lookup or a dig kind of a command. This is my domain. Now it is resolving to this IP. It is resolving to this IP 82.252.125.37. So that is what actually I have mapped here, like this IP, right? Like this we have mapped, right? For this actual domain. For explaining purpose, I have a different domain. It looks the same like Rushi Technologies, but it is let me tell you. Let me go to my home page, domains, rushitechnologies.com. There is a one more additional I is there here, Rushi, double I. But my actual domain is this one, rushitechnologies.com. This is I have mapped for my actual application, this where I am giving our training details, syllabus, right? When the next batch will be started, like a trainer details, syllabus details, like kind of a information, so that you guys can contact me about courses, about trainer, like this. So this is my application actually. Now, this one, just for explaining purpose, one more additional I is there. So this I will use now to map like this. So now I don't have a domain with GoDaddy, but I have a domain with sorry, I have a domain with Hostinger. I don't have a domain from AWS. For free tier, they are not allowing me to create also. For free tier, they are not allowing me to create also. But even though you have a domain from different provider, even though you have a domains from different providers, even though you have a domains from different provider, I can still use that domains with AWS services. I can map that domain with my AWS services. That can be S3. Also, I can map a domain. That can be directly with EC2. Also, you can map a domain. Otherwise, if required, you can map that domain with ELB load balancers. like that. For now we are not using ELB. Directly used I directly used EC2. I can map that IP, that EC to IP. Maybe you can create an elastic IP and you can assign that elastic IP as a public IP for that Nginx, because suppose if you stop and start the server for some reason, that the load balancer system, software load balancer, if the IP is changed again, you have to update that IP in the DNS records, right? So instead of that, if required, you can use elastic IP. You already know how to do that. For now, let it be same normal IP only. Public IP is not a static IP. But how to do that? Suppose, let me tell you. First, go to AWS. You can create. There are so many ways, guys. There are so many ways. Suppose here itself, right? Maybe even though your server is in AWS, if required, in DNS provider also you can give. Suppose you can directly take this load balancer IP, this IP directly. You can take this here. If required, you can go to this hostinger. Here there is a this domain, not I'm not disturbing the one. This one, Rushi Technologies. There is double I here. So I will go to this. Here there is a DNS name servers, like that. If I go to this, here there is a option to create a record, alias record. So if required, I can give directly that IP, this IP, add record, add record. I will add the record, right? I will add the record. I will add this record, like that. I will add this record. So I already have some mapping. Maybe I will delete this. I will delete this A record. A record means alias record. We have a different types of records, right? A record, alias record, C name. C name means you can map that domain with another name also, like that. So I am going to add a record like this. I have added now. Now this name. Now I have added that IP directly my AWS EC2 instance, this load balancer public IP. Here I have added in this DNS. So basically, this is like a DNS provider. This is like this is managing some name servers also. In this diagram, you can understand this one. I am not using AWS now for mapping. So this is my hostinger is my DNS provider. In that itself, I have created record. They also have their own name servers, the name servers. These name server details are part of this TLD servers, top level domain servers. These are these are like a this internet DNS, right? Now here I have mapped like that, but I have mapped with my AWS EC2 IP, that is public IP. Now let me see if that works. You can check, there is something called DNS checker, one website, whether that is resolving to that IP or not also. Maybe let's say Rushi, RUSHII, there are two I, technologies.com. Let's see. Now if you see, this name is resolving to this IP that I have created just now. I have created a record, alias record. That is where you are going to map the domains with your systems, like this. Now you guys access this rushitechnologies.com, like that. Rushitechnologies.com. It will result to that IP. But make sure you use HTTP protocol. HTTPS will not work. HTTPS, because in that load balancer, this name I have mapped with that load balancer, still it is serving the traffic on HTTP only. So let's use HTTP, that name. That name will result to IP, and it is going to that IP now. That is my load balancer IP. This IP. In this, the process is accepting on port 80, and it is internally forwarding the request to. Internally, it is forwarding the request to that my application instance, but my application is not running on the root context. So I am giving my application context like this. Now this is the real domain, and anyone from internet also, now you guys can access this application. Are you guys able to access this application with the given domain now? and you connected to internet, it is going to the DNS resolver. DNS resolver is contacting root server. Root server is giving TLD server. TLD server is giving name server. Now I am using a hostinger, so that is where the name servers are there. That is where the records also created. Are you guys able to access now with this domain, the real domain that I have registered and I have mapped with my IP, that load balancer IP? That load balancer is in AWS and my servers in AWS. Can you guys access that given URL and confirm? This is how the real domain is working. Now, what is happening when you also is a user? When you are also a user, so this is what happening. Request, suppose you guys accessed here, and let's say you don't. This is the real domain, not host file. I have not given. So you guys are accessing like this. That domain. This is the domain. Basically, this is protocol. This is the domain or a host name. This is your path, the context path, application context path. Now, first request is going to your DNS resolver. Like there are in the end, there like it is asking, give me the IP of this domain. Give me IP of this domain. It is asking, give me IP of this domain. Your DNS resolver. First request is going to your DNS resolver. Basically, that is typically managed by your internet service provider. Then again, it is going to contact and ask the DNS root server, give me the domain. But this is also a .com domain. It will say go and ask this .com TLD server. This .com TLD server will tell go and contact the name server. That name servers are basically managed by my DNS provider. If you say I'm using this hostinger, here there is a name servers also. This is the name server. This is the name server. These name servers also like a systems only. This name servers also like a systems, but these are managed by this hostinger. In that I have a record. In that I have a record. I have mapped this domain, that domain with this IP. So it is contacting that DNS name servers. So this is where I have a record. This is where I have a mapping, right? This is mapped with my IP. That is this IP. That is this IP. That is this IP. So now it is giving, okay, this is the IP of this domain. So you are asking, give me the Rushi Technologies .com IP. So this is the IP of that domain, because that is where we have created a record also. This is where there is a record also, right? So this is now not in our control. This is DNS resolvers are typically managed by ISP, internet service providers, public DNS resolvers. And this DNS root server, .com, TLD server, these are all like a outside services. If required for internal domains also, you can use internal DNS. That will resolve only within your network, not external. But for now, we are using internet facing application. This is how it is working. So again, the IP is given back to this. Then request is going to this IP. And we have not mentioned any port. We have not mentioned any port. So we have used HTTP protocol. So request is going to that system on port 80. Here there is a rules. This is not the actual system where my application is deployed. Any request comes to this server on this location, we have some kind of a rules, Nginx rules. Forward that request to this server, this server, this server, like that. That's why you can see response is coming. Again, round robin algorithm. That load balancing concept is same, but now the new thing here is a domain, DNS. I hope everyone is clear what is domain name, how it works, and how to map these domains like that. But one more way also you can do, even though you have a domain from outside of AWS, so you can create a name servers within AWS and you can map the records also within AWS only. That can be done this way. Suppose within AWS, even though you don't have a domain from AWS, here you can create a hosted zone. In AWS you can create a Route 53, you can create a hosted zone. I don't have a domain with AWS. I don't want to create also. Here, if you go to this Route 53 dashboard home page, here you can see there is a dashboard. Here, if you can request register the domain, if required, you can map the domains also by created a hosted zone. Here you are going to create a hosted zone for your domain. Let me give my domain, Rushi technologies.com, and here I'm going to create a public hosted zone. Public hosted zone will determine how the traffic should be routed on the internet, like a public DNS. Private hosted zone means internal domains, like that. But let me create a public hosted zone. If I create like this, it will give name servers. It will create a name servers, AWS name servers. But now your domain is not from AWS. Your domain is from GoDaddy, sorry, that hostinger. These name server details you have to update with your DNS provider. And here also you can create a record. Here also you can create a record, that alias record or a record. So, but if you are doing this way, your domain is not from AWS. Suppose you have registered the domain within AWS. If you directly create a record like this, suppose rushitechnologies.com, or if required you can use subdomain also, like www.rushitechnologies.com, like that. Here you can create a record again, a record, c name record, like that. Here also I can give the IP of that IP of my application, that load balancer IP. Here also I can give directly like this. But this way, if I give IP also, I can give directly. Suppose there is a different concepts, I will explain this route 53 again with ELB. I can give like this. But here it will not work this way, because your domain is from different provider, right? So this name servers details has to be updated there. Suppose go to this hostinger. Here you are changing the name servers itself, because now I am using change name servers. Here you can mention all these name server details, like one after the other. This way also you can do. In AWS itself you are defining the mapping, but the domain is from this hostinger. That's why I'm telling the hostinger, instead of your name servers, route the route the request to these name servers, because that is where I have a mapping. That is where I have a mapping. So you are telling the hostinger, route the DNS queries to these name servers, because that is where I have the mapping, like that. So you can save this. Now these records will not be used by hostinger. Now your domain is not pointing to hostinger. To manage the DNS records, you have to change to the hostinger. But I am using hostinger just for a domain, but mapping I am doing in AWS route 53. So that is what I have done. Now again, if I go back to this, right, here I have created a record, www.rushitechnologies.com. Otherwise, without subdomain, without www also, if anyone access also, you can map to that IP directly. You can give that load balancer IP. What is that IP? Let's take this IP. Let me give only IP, like this. Without www also, main domain, like this. Like this you have created a records. Now in hostinger you have a domain, but you told hostinger to any request comes to that domain, right? You are telling forward that request to these name servers. This is where I have created records also, like that. This is another way. Now it will take some time to reflect. If you directly access now www.rushi, rushii, this is the other domain .com, like this. It will take some time. It will not reflect immediately also. Maybe sometimes it will reflect immediately, sometimes it will take time also, because we have changed the name servers, right? So name servers we have changed. Suppose you can use a dig also. You can use dig also. Rushi technologies, this is the different domain, right? You can use dig also to see which IP it is resolving, like that. It is resolving to this IP. But which name servers, via which name servers, it is resolving. Suppose to which name servers it is resolving also, if you wanted to see, you can see that dig command, using dig command. So dig ns, something like this I will use. So which name servers it is, actually it is pointing. Now it is pointing to this name servers. I think now it is updated. Fine. So this is contacting this name servers. Basically, these name servers I have, in AWS I have created a hosted zone. They have the name servers. These name servers are now managed by AWS. In this name servers only I have created records. RushiTechnologies.com also, or www.rushitechnologies.com also map to this. Now that name servers I have updated in this DNS provider. Now request is going to this DNS provider, but DNS provider is telling I don't have a records, so contact these name servers. If that name servers are owned by AWS, now request goes to this name servers. This is where I have a records also. Now it is resolving. Now you guys access like this also, www.rushii technologies.com, but my application is not running on the root context. That's why you see like this. Now this is my application context. You guys should be able to access like this. This is how DNS will work, domain name. I hope now everyone is clear. Even though it's a small concept, but I have tried to explain in a detailed way so that you can understand what is DNS, what is DNS resolution. Sometimes in the interviews also they will ask this. So how these domains will resolve? DNS resolver, root server, TLD server. TLD server will give name servers details. Name servers, that is where you have a mapping like this. Request will reach actual systems. I hope everyone is clear on this DNS or a domain name concept. If required, you can register the domain also with some less price, maybe 200, 300 if it is coming for 1 year, 2 years like that. Otherwise, if you don't want to register and do this, within your local laptop host file, you can just give some name with that IP and you can use that. But that will work locally only within your system. If other users access that domains, it will not work. So there is a next very, very important concept. There is security. As of now, we hosted our application, we are serving the application, we have a high availability load balancing also, we secured our applications by hosting in a private servers, and only via load balancer you are able to, your customers are able to access this application. But still, if you see, this is not secure. Your connection to this site is not secure. You should not enter any sensitive information. Suppose, let's say here you are giving some kind of a sensitive information. Suppose you are giving a username, password, or maybe banking details like a credit card details, debit card details you are giving. The moment you click on submit, the data is being exchanged. The data is being exchanged from this client to the server. The client to the server data is being exchanged from your the client to the server data is being exchanged. But if it is HTTP protocol, the data will be transmitted in the network. The data will be transferred in the network in a plain text format. In a plain text format, the data will be transferred. In that case, there is a possibility of MMA, middleman attacks. Middleman attacks. There is a possibility for middleman attacks. Let's say there is a middleman, MMA, middleman attacks. Suppose if the data is being exchanged, especially in the public networks, data sniffing, there is a concept of phishing, sniffing, that hacking, right? So there is a possibility that what data is being exchanged from this client to this server, if it is exchanged in a plain text format, so so that this this person can understand, this middleman's or hackers can understand what type of data they are exchanging. Suppose if they are able to sniff your data or fish your data, right? If they are able to sniffing your data, they are able to understand what data you are giving. Suppose especially static websites, no problem, but the dynamic web applications like a banking web applications, like you are using banking apps, and they got to know what username password you are giving to access that application, or maybe your personal Gmail, Facebook, Twitter hacking, right? So in that case, you will understand what is the result that will impact, right? So here, instead of exchanging the data in a plain text format, we are going to use some kind of an encryption using some kind of a keys, certificates like that. So how to make this up communication, how to make the communication is secure between this client and server using encryption, decryption, that keys, that HTTPS, SSL, TLS, that is very, very important again. So that I will continue in the next session. That I will continue in the next session. So far we discussed about what is load balancer, what is hardware load balancer, software load balancers, cloud managed load balancers, what is the difference between load balancer and reverse proxy in the first session. In the next session, we have discussed about how to use Nginx and how we can configure a reverse proxy or a load balancer for that applications that we have discussed in the previous session, that is second session. In today's session we discussed about DNS. DNS is different, load balancing is different. Now again we are going to discuss one more concept called SSL and TLS certificates to secure the communication, the data communication between the systems in the network, how we can secure also. That we will continue in further session, that is tomorrow session. I hope now you are getting the whole point of all these concepts, right? We started with fundamentals and we started with the basics. Now we are going step by step. We are trying to implement all these things also. That's it for today, guys. From here, I will continue in the next session, that is tomorrow. If you have any specific questions or any specific queries, let me know. If you don't have a domain, you can use your local host file also, the way I have already explained. Otherwise, if you are okay to have spent some 200, 300, or 500, you can register some kind of a domain with some name and you can use the way I have done also. You can buy from GoDaddy or Hostinger or any other provider. It no need to be Hostinger. There are some kind of a DNS providers. If you have any questions, queries, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we are good to close the session for today. From here, I will continue tomorrow. Okay, if no questions, thank you. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow, guys. See you tomorrow.